This episode is brought to you by Fox One. Watch all 104 matches of the FIFA World Cup live in 4K for just $19.99 a month with 3 days free. Build your own multi-view, choose up to 3 streams, and follow player spotlights. Stay on top of every moment with live stats, highlights, and instant replays. The FIFA World Cup, streaming live on Fox One. Offers are subject to change. See fox.com for complete terms and conditions.
Need a laptop that's built to perform and designed to last all day? Select Windows 11 PCs starting at $499.99 are now at Best Buy. Learn more at bestbuy.com. Best Buy. Imagine that.
The Stone Zone. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
You are now diving headfirst into the deep end of the Stone Zone. This week, the Obama Presidential Center will celebrate its long-awaited grand opening in Chicago. There'll be speeches, celebrity appearances, glowing media coverage, and carefully choreographed tributes to hope and change. The official dedication is scheduled for June 18th, with public access beginning on Juneteenth. But behind the polished granite, the soaring architecture, and the endless self-congratulations lies a much uglier story. Multiple black-owned subcontractors that helped build the Obama Center are reportedly owed millions of dollars and are now fighting just to keep their businesses alive. The very black entrepreneurs the project promised to uplift through its diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives have instead become collateral damage in yet another elite progressive experiment. Yes, it's a devastating irony. The Obama Presidential Center was sold to the public as more than a museum. It was marketed as an economic engine for Chicago's impoverished South Side and a model for empowering minority-owned businesses. The Obama Foundation and its partners repeatedly touted ambitious goals for local hiring and minority participation, portraying the project as a blueprint for equitable development. Instead, according to various reports, several subcontractors are still waiting to be paid. Some are owed seven-figure sums. Others have reportedly indicated that they would accept pennies on the dollar simply to get paid and survive. Omar Sharif, president of the African American Contractors Association, has confirmed publicly that multiple black-owned subcontractors have sought the organization's assistance as they struggle to recover the money they believe they are owed. What was supposed to be a symbol of empowerment is rapidly becoming a symbol of exploitation. This controversy comes on top of an earlier federal lawsuit filed by black-owned 2-in-1 Concrete, a company, against project partners alleging discriminatory treatment and business practices that nearly destroyed that company. So regardless of the eventual legal outcome, the pattern is difficult to ignore. The biggest players walk away protected while smaller minority businesses are left carrying the financial burden. That is the story the mainstream media will not tell us. The Obama Center now carries a price tag of $850 million after years of delays, cost overruns, and construction challenges. It was promoted as a privately funded civic landmark, yet it has benefited from hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer-supported infrastructure improvements and public resources. At every stage, progressive politicians and activists celebrated the center as proof that government, philanthropy, and DEI-driven priorities could work hand in hand. But when it came time to make sure that black contractors actually got paid, those lofty ideals suddenly seemed to, disappear. This is not merely a construction dispute, it's a window into the modern progressive movement itself. You see, the left has been extraordinarily skilled at producing slogans, ribbon cuttings, and symbolic gestures, but when ordinary working Americans, particularly small business owners, needed results instead of rhetoric, they too often found themselves abandoned. The contrast with President Donald Trump's economic philosophy could not be clearer. Trump built his political movement around the idea that American workers, builders, and entrepreneurs deserve a government that rewards production rather than performance art. He's long argued that opportunity comes from growth, accountability, and keeping promises, not from endless lectures about equity while politically connected elites enrich themselves. If the Obama Presidential Center truly wanted to leave a legacy of empowerment, it would begin with one simple principle: pay the people who built it. Instead, as dignitaries gather to celebrate and television cameras capture the festivities, a growing number of black-owned contractors are left wondering whether there were ever anything more than props in a carefully scripted political narrative. The Obama Presidential Center was supposed to stand as a monument to hope, but for too many hardworking black contractors in Chicago, it has become a monument to broken promises. Meanwhile, for the better part of 4 months, the world economy has been living under a dark cloud. The closure of the Strait of Hormuz threatened to trigger the greatest energy shock since the Arab oil embargo of the 1970s. Roughly 1/5 of the world's seaborne oil supply and a significant portion of global liquefied natural gas transit through this narrow maritime corridor separating the Persian Gulf from the Gulf of Oman. When traffic through the strait slowed to a trickle, markets shuddered, energy prices surged, and economists began openly discussing the possibility of a global recession. Today, however, there is reason for cautious optimism. President Donald Trump yesterday announced that oil tankers are once more moving through the Strait of Hormuz and that ships carrying vital energy supplies are beginning to emerge from the Gulf. Markets reacted immediately. Oil prices fell sharply, and investors welcomed what appears to be the first meaningful step towards restoring stability to one of the world's most important trade routes. This development should not be underestimated by any means. The average American may never, of course, see the Strait of Hormuz on a map, but every American feels its effects. You see, the price of gasoline, diesel fuel, airline tickets, groceries, home heating, and manufactured goods are all influenced by the uninterrupted flow of energy through this strategic choke point. When oil cannot move, economies slow. When economies slow, well, families suffer. The Strait of Hormuz has long been one of the most strategically significant waterways on Earth. Barely 20 miles wide at its narrowest point, it serves as the gateway through which Gulf oil reaches world markets. So for decades, military planners, diplomats, and energy experts have warned that any disruption there would have profound consequences for the global economy. Well, those warnings proved to be correct. When conflict erupted earlier this year and shipping through the strait became increasingly dangerous, energy markets immediately responded. Oil prices climbed, insurance costs skyrocketed, tankers were stranded, supply chains were disrupted, governments around the world scrambled to secure alternative sources of fuel. The effects rippled through continents. Factories reduced production, transportation costs rose, inflationary pressures immediately intensified. Countries heavily dependent on imported energy found themselves confronting difficult economic choices. What made the situation particularly dangerous was that it demonstrated how fragile modern globalization has actually become. You see, an incident in a narrow stretch of water thousands of miles away can affect families filling their tanks in Florida, or trucks delivering goods in Ohio, or manufacturers operating right outside of New York City. The world's economy remains interconnected in ways that many Americans rarely actually consider. That's why the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz matters. It represents more than a movement of ships. It represents the restoration of confidence. Markets thrive on certainty, you see. Businesses invest when they know what tomorrow will bring. Consumers spend when they believe prices will remain stable. Investors commit capital when geopolitical risks appear manageable. The reopening of this critical maritime artery signals that the worst-case scenario may have been avoided. Credit should be given where credit is due. Throughout this crisis, President Trump has consistently emphasized the importance of restoring freedom of navigation and maintaining stability in global energy markets. His administration understood that prolonged disruption would not only harm America's allies, but would also impose significant costs on American families. Critics frequently mock the president's focus on energy prices, but they shouldn't. Energy is the lifeblood of modern civilization. Every product that reaches a store shelf, every airplane that leaves a runway, every tractor that harvests a field, and every truck that delivers food to a supermarket depends on affordable and reliable energy. When energy prices spike, the consequences are felt through the economy. When they decline, working families benefit. To be clear, the situation remains far from normal. Shipping companies remain cautious. Some vessels are still waiting for assurances regarding security. Insurance rates remain elevated. Analysts warn that a complete return of pre-crisis conditions could take months rather than weeks. Nevertheless, the trajectory under Donald Trump is encouraging. The war is witnessing the first substantial signs that one of the most dangerous economic disruptions in recent memory may finally be easing. There's another lesson here, the lesson that Washington should remember for years. America was told that energy independence was outdated, unnecessary, or even environmentally irresponsible. We were told that reliance on foreign energy sources posed no significant risk. The events of the past several months have exposed that as a pure fantasy. A nation that cannot produce sufficient energy is vulnerable. A nation dependent upon unstable regions for critical resources sacrifices both economic security and strategic flexibility. The United States possesses enormous energy resources. We have the ability to produce oil, natural gas, coal, nuclear power at levels that would have astonished previous generations. Energy abundance strengthens national security. Energy abundance lowers costs. Energy abundance protects American families from geopolitical turmoil occurring thousands of miles away. As ships once again navigate the Strait of Hormuz, Americans should be welcome to these new developments while remembering the lessons that we have learned. The global economy remains vulnerable. Strategic choke points still matter. Strong leadership also still matters, as demonstrated by President Trump. And energy security remains inseparable from national security. The world may have avoided an economic catastrophe here. That alone is cause for gratitude. Now comes the much harder task of ensuring that America never finds itself exposed to the decisions of hostile regimes and distant conflicts yet again. I'm Roger Stone. You're tuned in to the Stone Zone here on The Roger Stone Show. And when we come back, we're going to talk about why the New World Order is dead and exactly what's going on at the G7 summit at Yverdon-les-Bains, France. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
This is the Stone Zone with Roger Stone.
And he's a great, great person, Roger Stone.
The Stone Zone.
I didn't think the pain from the shingles rash would affect simple, everyday tasks like bathing, getting dressed, or even walking around. I was wrong. Though not everyone at risk will develop it, 99% of people over the age of 50 already have the virus that causes shingles, and it could reactivate at any time. I developed it, and the blistering rash lasted for weeks. Don't learn the hard way, like I did. Talk to your doctor or pharmacist today. Sponsored by GSK.
Choice Hotels get you more of what you value. Comfort Inn, it's calling your name. Save on the stay. Oh, and free waffles are yours to claim. Book direct at choicehotels.com.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Well, Act Blue, the leading online fundraising platform for Democrat candidates and progressive causes, now faces intense scrutiny from House Republicans over allegations that it processed illegal foreign donations and contributions made with fake or stolen identities. This latest wave of investigations builds directly on a prior April 2025 House report that first exposed serious weaknesses in Act Blue's donor vetting and compliance systems. Follow-up demands in April 2026 pressed Act Blue for full compliance with prior subpoenas, citing incomplete document production. House Republicans, primarily through the House Administration, Judiciary, and Oversight Committee, have investigated multiple allegations, including illicit foreign donations, Reports of millions of dollars in contributions from foreign indicators such as overseas IP addresses, prepaid cards linked to sources including Russia, allegedly enabled by lax vetting despite federal prohibitions on same. Then, of course, there are fake and stolen identities and fraud, widespread use of gift cards, prepaid methods, and fabricated identities. This was highlighted by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton's recent lawsuit and documented again in cases where investigators successfully made fraudulent donations through the platforms as a test. Then, of course, there are internal issues and cover-up claims. A mass exodus of ActBlue's legal and compliance staff followed the 2024 election, along with internal memos from Covington and Burling, their law firm, warning the CEO, Regina Wallace Jones, that her congressional testimony regarding multi-layered vetting processes may have been misleading, potentially exposing the organization to knowful and willful violations, including her own perjury. Congressional investigators by the Committee on House Administration, the Committee on Judiciary, and the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform produced reports detailing how ActBlue's systems allegedly enabled foreign nationals to funnel money into U.S. elections in violation of federal law, which of course strictly prohibits such contributions. These warnings triggered an internal crisis and a meltdown of the legal and compliance teams at ActBlue right after the 2024 election. One interim general counsel resigned, citing the company's leadership failure to address past deficiencies in priority and prior representations before the Congress. And then whistleblowers stepped forward, playing a significant role in exposing ActBlue's alleged compliance failures. Former ActBlue legal counsel Zain Ahmed is the most prominent whistleblower. He claims he faced retaliation after he raised concerns about fraud prevention and donor vetting deficiencies. So ActBlue is essentially a payment processing platform that is processing contributions from people that don't exist, with the money really coming from foreign countries. House committees released Ahmed's deposition transcript detailing these very allegations. Investigations also examined whistleblower complaints, retaliation against staff, and related resignation letters, including from the interim general counsel, one Aaron Ting. The fraud on ActBlue Part 2 was the House report, and congressional letters referenced documents on whistleblower retaliation as part of that internal cover-up. The House report outlines a total breakdown of ActBlue's compliance team linked to failures in blocking illicit foreign donations and an alleged internal cover-up. After congressional depositions, 5 ActBlue employees immediately invoked the Fifth Amendment 146 times when asked substantive questions. ActBlue is a Democrat Party scam. It's a fraud. But will anybody be prosecuted? We shall see. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to Stone Zone. Don't go away, because we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
This week, from June 15th to June 17th, some of the most powerful leaders on earth have gathered in the picturesque lakeside town of Evian-les-Bains, France, for the annual Group of Seven, better known as the G7 Summit. The G7 is an informal organization composed of the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Together, these nations represent some of the world's largest economies and have long coordinated policy on matters involving global finance, trade, energy, security, and geopolitics. The European Union also participates in the proceedings, while host nations frequently invite additional countries to attend portions of the summit. This year, France has extended invitations to leaders from India, Brazil, South Korea, Kenya, and several other nations from the Middle East. See, the G7 was established in the 1970s during a period of economic turmoil and was originally intended to provide a forum where the leaders of the industrialized democracies could discuss major international challenges and coordinate their responses. But over the decades, it has evolved into something much larger. See, while the organization possesses no formal legislative authority, its meetings often shape the direction of global economies and foreign policy. Decisions reached at these gatherings can influence everything from energy prices and trade agreements to military alliances and international sanctions. This year's summit may prove to be one of the most consequential in recent memory. The leaders' meetings in France are confronting a world that looks dramatically different from the one that existed just a decade ago. The war in Ukraine continues. The Middle East has been shaken by conflicts involving Iran and the recent disruption of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, which we spoke about earlier. China continues to expand its economic and geopolitical influence around the globe. Artificial intelligence is rapidly transforming industries and labor markets. Debt burdens throughout the developing world are reaching alarming levels. At the same time, voters across much of the Western world are increasingly skeptical about the very institutions that once claimed to guide the international order. See, in many ways, the summit is taking place at a historic inflection point. The global system that emerged after the collapse of the Soviet Union was built on the assumption that Western democracies would dominate the international order indefinitely. The United States stood as the world's lone superpower. Globalization accelerated, international institutions expanded their influence, political leaders spoke confidently about a future defined by ever-increasing economic integration and international cooperation. But many of those very assumptions are just no longer true. The rise of China has fundamentally altered the balance of global power. India is also emerging as an economic giant. Nations throughout the Middle East, Asia, Africa, and Latin America are asserting greater independence and pursuing their interests rather than automatically aligning with Washington, Brussels, or other traditional centers of power. The world is becoming increasingly multipolar. That reality hangs over every conversation taking place in Evian-les-Bains. President Donald Trump arrives at the summit at perhaps the most consequential and controversial figure in attendance. Whether one supports him or opposes him, there is no denying that Trump has challenged many of the assumptions that have governed Western policymaking for decades. Long before it became fashionable, he questioned trade arrangements that disadvantaged American workers and American families. He challenged the open border policies that undermined our national sovereignty. He criticized international agreements that imposed obligations on the United States while allowing our competitors to gain huge advantages. His critics called him disruptive. Many American voters, however, called him right. The debates Trump helped to ignite are now occurring across much of the Western world. Citizens increasingly demand governments that place their own national interests ahead of international consensus. They expect leaders to protect their borders, to strengthen domestic industries, to secure reliable energy supplies, and to prioritize the needs of their own people. The old political orthodoxy is now under siege. One of the clearest examples I can think of is energy policy. For years, many Western leaders pursued policies based on the assumption that traditional energy sources could be rapidly phased out without significant consequences. Recent events have proved the danger of that kind of thinking. The disruption of shipping through the Strait of Hormuz remind the world that energy security remains inseparable from national security. Nations that control their own energy resources enjoy a huge strategic advantage that cannot be replicated through political rhetoric or bureaucratic planning. The economic shocks caused by recent conflicts have reinforced another lesson. Supply chains matter. Manufacturing matters. Domestic production matters. And of course, national resilience matters. The citizens of many Western countries are rediscovering truths that previous generations understood instinctively. A nation that cannot produce what it needs eventually becomes dependent on those who can. A nation that abandons its industries weakens its own foundations. A nation that loses control of its borders eventually loses control of its future. These concerns are not limited to the United States. They're increasingly evident through Europe, Canada, and beyond. Perhaps the most significant issue confronting the leaders gathered in France is the growing gap between governing elites and ordinary citizens. Trust in major institutions has declined dramatically throughout much of the Western world. Citizens question whether the experts, the bureaucrats, and the international organizations that promised us prosperity and stability have delivered at all on those promises. The rise of populist movements across multiple continents reflects this growing skepticism. People want accountability. People, I think, want transparency. They want governments that serve citizens rather than institutions. That demand for accountability represents one of the defining political developments of our time. It is what explains the rise of Donald J. Trump. As America approaches our 250th anniversary, this debate carries special significance. The United States was founded upon the principle that government derives its legitimacy from the consent of the governed. That revolutionary idea remains just as relevant today as it was in 1776. The future will not be determined solely by declarations issued at international summits by multinational, international organizations and elites. It will be determined on whether governments can regain the trust of their citizens. The future belongs not to unelected bureaucrats, but to self-government, not to global abstractions, but to sovereign nations, not to fashionable theories, but to practical policies that improve the lives of real, actual people and families. So the leaders gathered in France may not fully realize it yet, but the world they inherited is quickly disappearing. The post-Cold War order is fading, the era of unquestioned globalization is ending, and a new chapter is beginning. The chapters that thrive in this new era will be those that remember a simple truth that history has repeatedly confirmed. Government exists to serve their people, not the other way around. That's the real story of what's unfolding at the G7 summit, and is a story that will shape the future of America and the world to come. More recently, on the South lawn of the White House this weekend, President Donald Trump kicked off America's 250th anniversary celebration in a way that only Donald Trump could. It was his 80th birthday, and against the backdrop of the Executive Mansion, beneath the flags of the United States and the branches of our armed forces, thousands gathered for UFC Freedom 250, the first professional sporting event ever held on the White House grounds. The event featured championship fights, military flyovers by the Blue Angels and the Thunderbirds, patriotic music, and chants of USA, USA, echoing across the nation's capital. To many Americans, it was more than a sporting event. It was a declaration that the celebration of America is back. After years of national self-doubt, historical revisionism, and cultural pessimism, President Trump has launched the America's semi-quincentennial, not with an apology for America, but with an outright celebration of American greatness. See, that may explain why the event infuriated so many liberals and members of the political and media establishment. See, for years, America's cultural elites have seemed uncomfortable with the very idea of patriotism or American exceptionalism. They spent decades teaching Americans to focus on every failure possible while minimizing our nation's greatest triumphs. They've encouraged young people to view our history through the narrow prism of grievance rather than achievement. They've attempted to transform pride in America into something that must be qualified, explained, or apologized for. Well, the American people never accepted that narrative, the one that the elites tried to force on us. As our nation approaches its 250th anniversary on July 4th, something extraordinary is happening in this country. Patriotism is making a comeback. The way I see it, across the country, Americans are rediscovering their history and their heritage and their pride in the greatest nation ever created by man. They're flying flags. They're attending historical reenactments. They're visiting battlefields, monuments, and museums. They're teaching their children about the Founding Fathers rather than apologizing for them. More importantly, they're rejecting the false choice between acknowledging America's imperfections and celebrating America's greatness. The United States was founded upon one of the most revolutionary ideas in human history. The Declaration of Independence proclaimed that our rights come not from kings or governments or bureaucrats or political parties, but from God. The Constitution created a system of limited government designed to protect individual liberty. The Bill of Rights established protections for free speech, religion, due process, private property, and self-government, unlike anything we've ever seen before. Those ideas changed human history. In fact, I would argue they still do. Yet for much of the last 2 decades, powerful institutions have worked relentlessly to undermine confidence in those American principles. Under President Barack Hussein Obama, America witnessed an unprecedented effort to redefine how citizens viewed their own country. Obama famously stated that he wanted to fundamentally transform the United States of America. In many respects, he attempted to do precisely that. His administration increasingly promoted the notion that America's history was primarily a story of oppression rather than opportunity. Traditional civic education gave way to ideological activism, patriotism became suspect, national borders became just an inconvenience. Historical figures were judged not only within the context of their own times, but through the political standards of the present. While the consequences have been profound, an entire generation was taught to focus more on America's shortcoming than its achievements. Children learned more about America did wrong than what America did right. They learned about slavery, but not enough about the abolitionists who ended it. They learned about segregation, but not about the sacrifices that dismantled it. And now we learn that Barack Obama, in the making of his multi-million-dollar presidential library, is stiffing the black entrepreneurs and tradesmen who built that landmark. That is the story of Barack Obama, but this is the story of the great American comeback. I'm Roger Stone. You're listening to Stone Zone. Don't go away, because we'll be right back.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back into the Stone Zone. We're talking about the fact that the New World Order is over and American patriotism is back. Nowhere do I think the whole revisionist impulse, where those wanting to focus on America's failures rather than its great achievements is evident, is more visible than the attack on America's historical figures. To me, it's outrageous. The idea that Philadelphia Mayor Frank Rizzo's statue that used to be outside City Hall in Philadelphia is someplace in storage. Statues have been torn down, monuments have been vandalized. Christopher Columbus, one of the most consequential explorers in human history, became a target for activists determined to erase his legacy from public life. Columbus Day, which I wrote about extensively in 2025, long recognized as a celebration of exploration, courage, and discovery, was recast as something shameful. This was never really about Columbus, of course. It was about America. You see, the goal was not simply to erase historical figures. The goal was to weaken America's connection to our own history. A nation disconnected from its past becomes easier to manipulate in the present. Fortunately, the American people proved to be more resilient than the revisionists among us anticipated. Ordinary Americans understand that history is complicated, that they understand that historical figures were human beings, not saints. They also understand that judging every person who lived century years ago, according to modern political fashions, is both intellectually dishonest and historically illiterate. More importantly, Americans understand that our history is overwhelmingly a story of progress, achievement, innovation, yes indeed, and liberty. Americans liberated Europe from Nazi tyranny. America rebuilt most of the world after World War II. America placed a man on the moon. American scientists revolutionized medicine. American entrepreneurs transformed technology. American soldiers defended freedoms around the globe. Millions continue to seek refuge and opportunity in the United States because, well, they understand something that many American elites seem to have forgotten. America remains exceptional, not because Americans are genetically superior, not because we are flawless, that's for sure, but because the principles upon which this nation was founded remain the greatest expression of individual liberty ever conceived by man. President Trump's return to office has coincided with a renewed confidence in those very principles. Rather than apologizing for America, he celebrates it. Rather than diminishing our history, he embraces it. Rather than viewing patriotism as some kind of relic from the past, he understands that the love of country remains essential to national unity. So the approaching 250th anniversary offers all Americans a unique opportunity. We can continue down the path of historical revisionism and national self-loathing, or we can rediscover the truth about our own country. The truth that America is neither perfect nor evil. America is extraordinary. The truth is that our history includes mistakes, but it also includes the fact that we corrected those mistakes, and we continue even today to do so. Our achievements remain unmatched by any nation in human history. We should not be ashamed to say it. The truth is that generations of Americans built a constitutional republic that has provided more freedom, more prosperity, and more opportunity than any government the world has ever known. So as fireworks illuminate the sky this 4th of July, and Americans celebrate 2.5 centuries of independence, we won't be merely celebrating a date on a calendar. We'll be celebrating an idea. The idea that free people can govern themselves. The idea that liberty comes from God, not from government. The idea that individuals should be free to pursue happiness, prosperity, and purpose without interference from an all-powerful state. The fact that we should be free of government surveillance and spying, that Big Brother should mind its own business. Those ideas remain worth defending, they remain worth teaching, and they certainly remain worth celebrating. Patriotism is back because Americans are remembering who they are. President Trump has helped usher in this new era of self-recognition, and he'll help lead this revival. So as America enters its 250th year, the greatest chapter of America's story may still lie ahead. For those who think America's greatest days are behind us, those people are called liberals. And, well, liberalism is a mental disease. Thanks for joining us today on the Stone Zone of the Roger Stone Show. Until tomorrow, God bless you and Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?